Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. I am your host, the OT Astartes, and as some of you may know, I am an avid Doctor Who fan and have been for many years now. So this video in general is going to celebrate Doctor Who, celebrate my experience as a fan, and the reason why I feel as though it has lost its momentum since 2018. So without further ado, let's begin. It all began on the 23rd of November 1963, which was the day after the assassination of former US President John F. Kennedy. Due to the events of that day, the first episode had to be broadcast again. The first story was titled An Unearthly Child, which kick-started the show with William Hartnell as our crusading Time Lord, Susan, his granddaughter, and first companions Ian Chesterton and Barbara Wright. Now, as with any other pilot, we'd be introduced to the main characters, but we were also introduced to perhaps one of the most important elements of the show, the TARDIS. Standing for time and relative dimensions in space, this is special because the exterior takes the form of a simple police box, and inside we see a massive interior with a six-sided console with many functions, buttons and levers to take one to a destination of their choosing. And that goes for both time and space as well. In fact, you could say the blue police box is more known for Doctor Who than it is for actual policing. Now, of course, every TV show needs a theme song, and Doctor Who's is perhaps the most recognisable. With a 4-drum beat at the beginning, following into that iconic melody, and into the middle 8 on occasion as well, you'd know Doctor Who was on when you heard the song. This was accompanied by shots of a time tunnel, followed closely by the names of the lead cast, a face coming onto the screen, followed by the iconic logo. The tune has been the same since day one. The theme was originally composed by Ron Granger and brought to life by Delia Derbyshire and the BBC Radiophonic Workshop. But it's had many successful takes on the theme tune as the show has evolved. The middle 8 had always been a part of the closing credits, but Kev McCulloch decided to add this into the opening theme as Sylvester McCoy took the reins. This was also used as part of the 1996 intro for the movie, and a trilogy of Big Finish audio dramas featuring Mary Shelley as the companion. Now let's talk about the Doctor. The character of the Doctor has always been referred to in the credits as Dr. Who. Later this changed to Doctor Who, and then call him the Doctor. But what about the Doctor himself? Well, although the show claims that there have been 15 Doctors, lore-wise there have been a lot more. He or she is a Time Lord from the planet of Gallifrey in the constellation of Kasterborous and has the ability to regenerate when he or she dies. The first incarnation was played by William Hartnell. Patrick Troughton was the second, who was a change from Hartnell's grumpier grandfather-esque iteration. John Pertwee was the third. He specialised in building gadgets and Venusian Aikido. Tom Baker was the fourth and probably the man who defined the character, with his long multicoloured scarf and offering jelly babies to all. Peter Davison was the fifth. He's famous for wearing a celery stick, question marks on his shirt, with his heart on his sleeve, and an avid fan of cricket. Colin Baker's sixth incarnation was more famous for having every colour in the rainbow on his costume. Sylvester McCoy's seventh Doctor held a question mark umbrella in his hand and was a complex personality known for his keen strategies. Paul McGann's eighth Doctor, although short-lived, had that charm and wit. Christopher Eccleston fantastically reinvented the character for a new generation with his serious but fun iteration of the character. David Tennant is perhaps the second most iconic incarnation, with his long trench coat, pinstripe suits, and action hero aura shouting "Allons-y" wherever he goes. Matt Smith's Doctor brought some bow ties, excitement and light-heartedness, and fish fingers and custard. Sir John Hurt, even though he was a one-off incarnation, gave the Doctor the attitude of a war-torn hero, saying the words, "No more." Peter Capaldi's Doctor was the Doctor who grew up, standing firm in the face of adversity. Jodie Whittaker was the first full-time female Doctor. David Tennant then returned to the role in 2023 to celebrate the show's 60th anniversary year, and current Doctor Ncuti Gatwa can only be summed up by using the word flamboyant. Other iterations of the Doctor have included a series called Unbound, exploring many what-if scenarios with actors including David Warner. Joe Martin played the fugitive Doctor. The Peter Cushing films had a very different take on the franchise and the character. David Bradley and Richard Hurndall both played the first Doctor in specials, and Sir John Hurt was brought in to portray the War Doctor in the 50th anniversary special, The Day of the Doctor. And plus, many fans have produced their own media with their own take on the character. But all in all, there have been so many versions of our favourite Time Lord. But let's talk about another well-known thing about the show. The Daleks. It was the second story that introduced the most iconic monster of the show, the Daleks. These menacing pepperpot creatures are mostly associated with the word exterminate, and they have been scaring children and adults into hiding behind the sofa ever since debuting. Nearly every Doctor has had an encounter with these creatures in one way or another, and as the show went on, through the years we have been introduced to the squid-like mutants inside the casing, the Dalek Emperor, the Dalek Supreme, the Dalek Time Controller and the Time Strategist, and different types of units all prepped for battle. But perhaps the most terrifying one of them all is their creator, Davros. So Davros was introduced in Genesis of the Daleks. His main goal is to make sure that the Daleks become the supreme beings. I suppose the reason why Davros is so renowned is that most of his body is still there, but his bottom half is a Dalek travel machine due to an accident which left him crippled. His scientific methods are a contribution as to what makes the Daleks the scary and screaming monstrosities that they are. I suppose another thing about Davros is that he is the living embodiment of ruthlessness. In the show's lore, the Daleks were originally people called Kaleds. If you scramble around with the words a little, it spells out the word Dalek. But the Daleks aren't the only monsters in the show. The second, I would say, would be the Cybermen. They first appeared in the story The 10th Planet, which was the final outing for William Hartnell's Doctor, and featured the first on-screen regeneration. The Cybermen were originally humans from Earth's twin planet, Mondas. The Mondasians needed to find a way in order to survive, as their lifespans were getting rather short. So they felt that the only way to survive was to alter themselves by performing endless surgeries to ensure their survival. However, this got to the point where their humanity was gone completely, thus creating the Cybermen. And their ultimate goal is to convert everyone to be like them. Now, the Mondasians were but the first generation of Cybermen, and there have been many more along the show's history, from the tomb world of Telos, all the way to Parallel Earth. Also, they are usually led by either a cyber leader, a cyber controller, or even a cyber planner when it comes to it. They stomp around using catchphrases like, "You will be like us," and "Excellent," and "Eradicate them," and perhaps their most famous line, "Delete." There are many, many more monsters to name, like the plastic mannequin Autons, the reptilian Silurians, the war-obsessed Ontarans, the farting and body-snatching Slitheen. There have also been times where the Doctor has fought his own kind, and it's here when we introduce the most famous example of the Master. The Master is the Doctor's equal. While our hero seeks to explore, the Master seeks to cause chaos and conquest. Whenever the Doctor thinks he's stopped him, he escapes until they meet again. But at times, the Master has also teamed up with monsters to take down their common foe, or hypnotising others. And while the Doctor has his trusty sonic screwdriver which helps get him out of any pickle, apart from if it's deadlocked sealed or wood, the Master carries either a laser screwdriver or a tissue compression eliminator. Other Renegade Time Lords include the science-obsessed Rani, the psychotic 11, whose other incarnations are always haunting him, the meddling monk, the master manipulator Padrak, and even the president of Gallifrey himself, Rassilon. The Doctor will always be fighting a monster saving the universe. But he also has a companion. And over the years they've come in all shapes and forms, including Sarah Jane Smith, K9 the Robot Dog, Stephen Taylor, Scotsman Jamie McCrimmon, Time Lord or Lady Romana, the American Perry Brown, the ever-youthful Ace with her Nitro 9, Rose Tyler, Clara Oswald, Graham O'Brien, and Ruby Sunday. These names are but a handful of friends who have helped the Doctor through thick and thin. And likewise with the Doctors, there have been many more in audios, novels, and fan-made productions. I think it's more than fair to say that this show is a worldwide treasure and few others could ever match up to its reputation. All in all, there have been 3 eras in the show's history. The original classic series, which ran from 1963 till 1989. After its cancellation, a load of novels filled in the gaps where the classic series had left off. And in 1996, Doctor Who, the movie, materialised into cinemas. But it wasn't successful enough to produce a fully fledged TV series with Paul McGann as the main role. So Big Finish decided to use the 8th Doctor to their advantage and produce their own audio adventures. This is dubbed the Wilderness Years. And finally, we have the revival of the show, which was rebooted for a new generation. When it came back, the show boomed again, with so many new fans coming in to watch Tennant, Eccleston, Smith. Around this time, I would say it was the peak for modern Doctor Who. Now, there were 2 spin-offs that were coexisting as well for 2 very separate audiences. The first one being the Sarah Jane Adventures. So, the Sarah Jane Adventures revolved around former companion Sarah Jane Smith, her adopted son Luke, and his friends Clive and Maria, K9, her supercomputer Mr. Smith, voiced by the one and only Alexander Armstrong, Sky, who for some reason I don't remember, and later on, Rani Chandra, who would fill in for Maria after she left. They would all join Sarah Jane to defend the Earth from all sorts of extraterrestrial life. This show was aimed towards younger kids, mainly being on CBBC of course. But there was also another spin-off for the older audience, Torchwood. This was set in Cardiff, and this show was led by another former companion, Captain Jack Harkness, and his team of operatives, including Owen Harper, Toshiko Sato, Gwen Cooper, and Yanto Jones. This had a more adult approach to the show and aired on BBC Three. Now I believe that this was the peak for modern Doctor Who, as we had the main show fronted by David Tennant, and 2 spin-offs for 2 very different audiences. And both shows' legacies have continued in the form of Big Finish. Now, for this next section, I'm going to talk about my experience as a fan. And when I talk about my love for the show, I'll try and use my memory as best as I can. So, I wasn't really a fan of David Tennant's Doctor, so I watched the Sarah Jane Adventures on CBBC instead. When I really got into Doctor Who was the Matt Smith era. I think Matt Smith was my era. I suppose my favourite stories of his are the two-part The Impossible Astronaut and The Day of the Moon. As towards the end we see him confront the Silence and rescuing Amy Pond, while using the Silence's memory manipulation tactics against them with such a great performance, and in fact I'd say that Series 6 was my favourite series. I also loved the idea of the Silence at first, and the whole mystery behind Madame Kovarian. Plus we had the whole River Song storyline and who supposedly killed the Doctor while dressed as an astronaut. I can also remember obsessively playing the adventure games and using the end of the TARDIS episode to play around with the console as if I was the Doctor. What made it so unique is that it had puzzles, good storylines, facts about real life and the show itself, and you also get to play as Amy Pond. I was also a big fan of Blood of the Cybermen because it featured the Cybermen, of course, and Shadows of the Vashta Nerada felt so immersive, and I loved the setting. You could see that they put their every effort into the graphics. And I loved the suspense of the story as well. City of the Daleks was also cleverly written, and I love how we get to go back to Skaro and get to sneak around whilst trying to avoid the Daleks and prevent getting exterminated. And the third episode, TARDIS, I love the ending where we get to fiddle around with the console. This was the ultimate Doctor Who video game. The Gunpowder Plot story was okay, but it doesn't top the original 4. Another great thing about this period was also the Doctor Who experience. If you ever went there, you were in for a treat, especially during its time in London. I remember running out screaming when the Daleks first turned up. Yeah, autism can be very embarrassing sometimes. But alas to that, I think I can recall taking a bit of a break in 2012, I'm not too sure. When it comes to this, my memory is very conflicted. But in 2013, Virgin Media had their on-demand service where you could watch selected episodes of shows like Ben 10, SpongeBob, Star Wars The Clone Wars, Johnny Test and Bakugan New Destroyer. They also had a series of classic episodes which would celebrate the 50th anniversary, so I watched the final part of Planet of the Daleks and Resurrection of the Daleks, where I enjoyed the fight scenes and especially Terry Malloy's portrayal as Davros. With that, I watched a bit of Series 7 Part 2 and got back into the show. I also gave Christopher Eccleston's Doctor and the 10th Doctor a chance, now seeing why both actors were so popular in the role. And in fact, after watching The Empty Child and The Doctor Dances, this is when I got into swing music. Later along the line we also got a TiVo box, so I recorded various episodes of Classic Who which were shown on the Horror Channel at the time, which made me like the classic era as much as the revival. The 50th anniversary celebration was one of a lifetime. I remember the lead up, the documentaries about the show, An Adventure in Space and Time, the 5-ish Doctors reboot featuring Peter Davison, Colin Baker, Sylvester McCoy, and a cameo from Paul McGann. And a 12 Again special episode. And when the Day of the Doctor was first broadcast, I was not disappointed. This was the perfect way to celebrate the 50th anniversary of a TV show. And especially at the end, when all the Doctors rushed to save Gallifrey, I lost my mind when Peter Davison came on the screen, and was so happy to see our first glimpse of Peter Capaldi. After that, Matt Smith bowed out of the show, making way for Peter Capaldi, who I regard as the last great Doctor. This Doctor was somewhat of a change from the previous incarnation. I liked him because he was more gritty and he had some great stories. As well, we had Doctor Who Symphonic Spectacular, which I got to see in London. The Doctor Who experience had a bit of a regeneration, if you will, and who could forget the Doctor Who Festival? And I remember attending and buying some Big Finish, as well as getting my guide for the day autographed by both Beth Chambers and Lisa Bowerman, who were the loveliest people I could ever meet. It was also around this time when I started collecting Big Finish. With this, I discovered my second favourite Doctor, Paul McGann. These adventures were well produced and well acted out, with new characters and more freedom than if it was adapted onto the screen. My favourite Big Finish stories has to be Dark Eyes and Doom Coalition. I love how much originality Doom Coalition has with some of its characters. From Kalira, aka the Sonomancer, Padrak manipulating everything, and of course, the 11. As well as audio dramas, I also collected some classic DVDs, with my favourite stories being The Curse of Fenric and Earthshock. As 2016 rolled around, the show took a year's hiatus due to other events. Now, it was around that time when I started to watch Star Trek, the two Ronnies, One Foot in the Grave. My interests were expanding. But another show that I discovered, and this is really embarrassing for me, and I can't believe I was a fan of this show, is The Next Step. You know, that Canadian dance show where the same shit happens every episode? And I've also been a massive fan of watching stop motions, whether it be using Doctor Who figures, Star Wars figures. I can remember the first Doctor Who stop motion that I ever watched involved the 11th Doctor and every generation of Cybermen up till 2011. Another stop motion channel that I watched was Batman March. Now, he made a full-on 8th Doctor series featuring some new companions, monsters from the classic era, and it felt like I was actually watching an episode. The set design was amazing, and I love how he used figures not just from the Doctor Who and Primeval toy lines, but he used figures from other franchises. And everyone had a part to play in it. Also, I love his own personal take on the Time War, so he did a what-if scenario. The 8th Doctor fought with the Time Lords instead of going off on his own. And his own custom Dark Eyes figure inspired me to make one of my own. And, in fact, he didn't just do the 8th Doctor. He wrote stories for both classic Doctors and newer ones as well. This channel is what I would say is partly what inspired me to take up the art of stop motion myself. Now, I don't do all the voices because, frankly, I'm a bad actor and my voice is very annoying. So, I would prefer to use subtitles instead because it's easier for me. And as you can see on this channel, I have a series called Hero Factory and Transformers, which is a crossover between Lego Hero Factory and set in the Transformers G1 universe. I also made Doctor Who Gallifrey Falls about a year ago, which was my celebration for the 60th anniversary. And I have been doing some homemade stop motions for many, many years now. Now, I remember the first Doctor Who stop motion that I attempted to make was one which involved the 5th Doctor going to an Eden Project style place and encountering Davros. Now, my first actual stop motion story that I wrote and filmed was a 5th Doctor story featuring Turlough and the Nickelodeon universe. So, the companion was set to be Nora Thunderman, and we had a cameo from Hank and Barbara, as well as the main villains being the Cybermen and the Sontaran. Now, these early stop motions are never going to be available on YouTube because I feel as though all I did in it was put a Next Step character with a Doctor, and there you go, here's a series. This is an episode of Doctor Who, Adventures in Time and Space. It I wasn't very creative, and I was too much of a mark for the next step. Being a fan of that show is something that I am very much ashamed of. But my creative spark really started when Sierra left without a simple explanation. So me and my Whovian mind decided, here's a good idea, let's pair her up with the 8th Doctor. And this, my friends, is why us autistic people aren't in charge. As the years went on, I paired more and more characters who vanished without a trace up with each Doctor. So pairings included Cassie and the 12th Doctor, Amy's mother with the 6th Doctor as punishment. As the 2010s went on, I decided to involve other franchises such as Star Trek, Star Wars, Pirates of the Caribbean, Every Which Way, which aired on Nickelodeon, as did the Thundermans. Yeah, it was a wild phase of my life, and quite frankly, I'm glad that it's all over now. Now, this section of the video is going to be my own opinion and a bit more negative. This is because I think that Doctor Who has been going downhill since 2018 because the writers don't care about the show's history nor the character of the Doctor. I feel as though Ncuti's Doctor is highly emasculated. I think that the Doctor needs to be more authoritarian. The writing of the show it's not unique anymore. They disrespect the lore by retconning the origin of the Doctor. I would rather us not know much about the Doctor's origin, because that's what makes the character special. I would rather the Doctor just be another Time Lord than a godlike being, or the Timeless Child, or whatever. The Timeless Child, I think, should have been Rassilon, because when you think about it, he is the High President of Gallifrey, and he is a strong adversary. You've got to understand that when you are in charge of a show like Doctor Who with a long-lasting legacy, you have that responsibility of respecting the legacies of characters that are a part of the show, that are integral. You know, not just the Doctor, but the Daleks, the Cybermen, even the TARDIS, and create lasting ones of the characters that you create. I also feel as though the production value has little to no effort put into it. I think that CGI is horrendously overused, and some of the designs for some of the things look absolutely horrendous. So like the new Sonic TV remote, the Cybermen from the Chibnall era, and the TARDIS console rooms from both the 13th and 14th and 15th Doctors. I also feel as though the older and more knowledgeable Doctor Who fans have been left behind. So the fans who know the character, who have been there since day one, or the 70s, 80s, you know, who truly understand what the show meant to them when they were watching it growing up. The simple thing is, we just want good stories that respects the legacy of the show and the character. And I feel as though it is lacking very much that. So yeah, that's that cheery rant over and done with. But if there's one thing that we can all agree on, no matter which Doctor you are a fan of, I think that we can all agree Doctor Who overall has been an absolute treasure of a show. Throughout its history, nothing will ever match up to its reputation. It is an institute. And I want to end on a rather positive note. There is never going to be another show like this one. Its charm and sophistication has attracted both fans old and young. From Hartnell to Gatwa, the Doctor will always be a one-of-a-kind character, stopping evils and bringing hope wherever he or she goes, with friends who have helped him along the way. And us, the fans, have certainly felt like companions of the Doctor, no matter what face he's wearing. The thing about the Doctor is that he or she have always been a hero to so many people. And the show has inspired people to make stop motions, write audio dramas, create 3D printing, customise action figures, artwork, books, and even in the school playground. We know that the fans will carry on the show's legacy and love. All in all, Doctor Who will never be forgotten. So I'd like to thank you all. Wait, what the bloody hell's happening here?
Oh, hello. Is this thing working? Now, me and a few of my friends would just like to thank you all.
Thank you all for being here. In our darkest hours and our finest moments. You have all been brave hearts and passionate fans. Friends till the end of the road. And even when we weren't here, you held on to faith, knowing that the Time Lord Victorious will always be a hero to so many people, no matter what I look like, or who my companions are. So it just leaves us to say that I'm the Doctor, and I always will be. And we're not done yet. Come along now, we've got places to go, people to see, and we have work to do.